Have you ever felt like you know what you want to say, but when it actually comes to expressing it outwardly, whether that's online or in your work, or even just talking about what you do with other people, it suddenly starts to feel tense or unclear or diluted or just not quite what you mean? If that's you, and I've 100% been there and still sometimes feel like I'm there as well, then this conversation is definitely for you. Today's guest is Sherry Fang. She is a communication coach and consultant, and she helps people take on what's going on in their head, their ideas, their work, their voice, and translate it into something that actually lands in the outside world. And this is something I see come up again and again with creatives, as I said, including myself. We can feel things really deeply. We can have a strong sense of what we create or what our work means to us. But then communicating that clearly or confidently or in a way that actually connects with other people is a whole different skill, let me tell you. Sherry has worked with everyone from founders to doctors to PhD to creatives, helping them communicate their ideas, whether that's in pitching, brand building, or just simply being understood by a wider audience. She is the creator of Soft Power, which is a podcast and coaching practice that explores different kinds of strength, not necessarily being loud or forceful, but something that's grounded, intentional, and deeply self-aware. And that really underpins everything we talk about in this episode. And I'll also give a shout out that I'm going to be on Sherry's podcast very soon. I don't know when it's going to come out, but whenever it does, I'll put it in the show notes. But in this conversation, we get into finding your voice without losing yourself, the tension between authenticity and being understood, what happens when you start putting a price on your work or a big scary price on your work, and the process of just coming back to yourself again and again and asking that question of what is true for me and what do I mean to say. This is a really honest conversation, as always, as we always have here on Maverick Mind, but it's about expression, identity, and learning how to be seen without compromising who you actually are. So Sherry Fang, a huge welcome to Maverick Mind.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
There's so many things I think that you'd be able to guide the audience through loads of stuff that you have done and where you're going with what you're doing now. But I kind of want to begin with communication because I know that that is your
Mm,
background. And I know that it's something that a lot of creatives, including myself, honestly, really struggle with or have to really
mm,
practice because we can be really in our heads.
mm,
And like
mm,
the idea is really there in our mind, but then we struggle to maybe communicate either what it's about when we create something, a piece of art or a design, or um, just for it to really feel like what is within us is translated outwardly. So I kind of want to know, I'll kind of dive
mm.
into what your work in communication really look like. And are there any kind of ways in which you find help strengthen somebody's communication muscle? Because it really is a muscle, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the more I teach or train communication, the more I think it is difficult, especially nowadays. And you know what you would talked about how, because I know a lot of your listeners are creators and trying to put their work out there, and obviously you do need that communication to actually to put it out there and actually communicate and engage with whoever that's the consumer, right? And mostly what I do a lot in the past is that I actually helped a lot of doctors, a lot of PhDs, a lot of them to actually translate their innovation onto a pitch deck. Like, how do you communicate, let's say, to investors to get money? Or how do you communicate to the buyers, like, or clients? And that does take a lot of the shift in the mindset. Because when I think any creator, anyone, when you're in your field for so long, you spend so much time studying and innovating. I think it's really easy to really get into your head. And all
Yes.
you wanted to talk about is what you already know. But I think it's a lot of times we really assumed that everyone else know as much as you know, but actually that's really not the case. And I think that is really where I come in and really helped them to, let's say, okay, let's take a step back. Um, what do you think, like, who are your audience? Actually, like, I think that's the first thing we really have to define that. I think a lot of the creators or even a lot of the doctors or innovators that I talk to, they think their product is for everyone. They think their
Mm.
art is for everyone. And I think that is really the first thing I always tell them to, okay, let's define that because it's not for everyone. If it's for everyone, it's for no one. So you have
Yes.
to be very, very specific about that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially when we start sharing our work or start sharing who
Mhm.
what we're creating or who we are with the world in whatever way, social media, through networking or whatever else, sometimes we do go in with that really broad kind of
Mm,
mindset of like, well, I don't know, it could be for this person or it could be for this person or it could be there. But I think it really shifts, and I find it really shifts someone's confidence in sharing their work when you are a little bit more specific about who you're speaking to, because then it doesn't feel so overwhelming and so naked of like, I'm just going to share it with everybody. Now it's like,
mm,
no, I can imagine this piece living in this kind of space, or this kind of person wearing these clothes, or this
yeah.
kind of brand having this logo or whatever else. I think then it
Mhm,
does actually kind of strengthen your conviction and
mhm,
what you're actually putting out into the world.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I think like what you said, it's about your conviction. And I think a lot of times once we're very defined with who we wanted to talk to and who actually, I think everyone sort of had this idea of what's our ideal audience? Who are the people? Like, what's their day to day like? Exactly what you said. Be obsessed with the audience, actually try to understand, their routine and what do they like, what kind of clothes they wear, what sort of drinks or food they like to consume, to get into their head. And then you will know so much better on just how do you approach that and from what perspective. And I think it does take a bit of a time, though. I find that for a lot of the creators or anyone to actually take a step back and willing to do that, because I think there's a lot of ego there
Yeah,
when you like so eager want to put this out there and you feel like everyone's gonna love it and this is for everyone. But for you to admit that maybe it's not for everyone and it's okay because you do have to be very specific, but I think it's just getting rid of that layer, that ego, that's one of the hardest thing, I think, for a lot of creators.
absolutely. Yeah. And to kind of, because sometimes when we're creating something, we put so much of ourselves into it that we
Yeah.
feel like then somebody not liking it is somebody not liking us. That if you don't like my
Mm,
work, you don't
hmm.
like me as a person. But that's not the case. It's just something that you've created. It's not who you are. And it's actually almost like a diary entry or a journal entry to who you were more than who you are in this present moment. Because we kind of like grow through the process of making something. I find also something that can be tricky is when we are creating something and then putting it out there, and the audience is not necessarily who we are.
Hmm.
Like for
Hmm.
example, if
Hmm.
you're an
Hmm.
artist or like a very um creative, quite free person,
Yeah.
to then be in a boardroom when you're pitching for investment for your business, that
Hmm. Hmm.
investor is not living the same life as you are necessarily,
Yeah. Yeah.
we assume. Or likewise, if you're creating a painting and you live quite a
Mm.
bohemian lifestyle, but you see it in like a Manhattan loft and it's worth a lot of money, the person who buying it might not live exactly the same lifestyle as you. And sometimes it feel like a kind of identity shift or a disconnect to try and speak to somebody that you may not have in your circle much, I
Yeah.
think.
Hmm. Yeah, that is a real challenge. Absolutely. So I do think that a lot of times, for example, for my case, for a lot of my clients, we try to give them as much information as possible. Let's say, what are the investors looking for? What sort of things they're actually trying to get from your pitch deck. And a lot of times you don't have a whole lot of time. And I think with content creation, it's the same. Everyone's attention span is just getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So you
Yeah.
don't have a lot of time to grab someone's attention. How do you do that very quickly? So we try to give them as much information as possible and to really allow themselves to immerse in that environment as much as they can. Because you do have to have a bit of a patience to learn, right? What are my audience? Like, who are my audience? And a lot of times, sometimes if I'm creating a product and it just so happened to be, let's say, popular for the teenage girls, and I'm definitely not that in that age range. Now I have to get into their head and do my own research, understanding what do they want, what kind of language should I even use to talk to them. So yeah, so it does take a bit of a time to do that research and to immerse in that environment.
Yeah, definitely. I glad you brought up social media as well, because I think sometimes
Mm,
when it can be like slightly easier when the person is in front of you, but then when you're speaking on social media, I think that it can be more challenging. I see a lot of creators kind of just share themselves or share what they're going through or share,
mm,
what they feel in the moment. And that's nice as a diary, but it's not
mm,
necessarily landing with the person that you're trying to sell that piece to or try and sell that thing to. It's a
mm,
really fine balance, I think, of sharing your life on social media and also how you share it in a way that is going to resonate with who you're speaking to.
mm. Yeah, and I find that sometimes another difficulty is that how do you stay true to yourself throughout the process? Because a lot of times here you are, and then you know that, oh, I need to understand my audience. And then you kind of try to be in their shoes. And then now it's kind of hard to come back to yourself. So it's like having that balance, always know what you want, but then also be able to communicate with your audience, but still not losing yourself. I think that usually is a process that is hard. And even for a lot of companies, they are pitching to investors. I think it's really hard for them as well. Sometimes they get so sucked in with what the investors want and they started creating product with that lens. But that's not what you're supposed to do. You're still the expert in your field. You should be doing what you spend decades of doing. Um, but so I think it's always that balance. I think that's human nature, right? Once we feel like, oh, they're listening to me, they like that piece of information, let me really just get into that. And sometimes we lose ourselves throughout that process.
Yeah, definitely. It's really easy to get stuck in that kind of people pleasing, especially I think like
Hmm.
if you're a creator and you're working by yourself or you have a small business that like genuinely needs money and oxygen to move. And then
Yeah.
people are buying something that maybe you don't necessarily really love yourself or don't really like creating, but you just keep making it because it's the thing that sells. That's a really, although obviously a bit small business needs money to keep moving, it's also quite a surefire way to then feel really unfulfilled in what you're doing because you lose yourself, because you lose your voice. And I
Hmm.
think it's again quite a fine balance to strike between, you know, making money and not losing yourself. And I think that really comes through doing stuff that make you like understand yourself better. I think when we don't really understand ourselves and we don't really have that grounding within of who
Yeah.
we are and what we want, it's
Hmm.
again even easier to slip into that. Is there um any kind of tools that you follow or you share that really help people to come back to that knowing who they
Mm.
are and what they
Mm.
want?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, it really does need to come from who you are and how much you actually understand about yourself. about your own product, about yourself, about your mission and everything. So, I mean, usually what we do is we have this like days, I would say it takes about a few weeks to be quite honest to really get into the exercise because it can get really, really challenging just to ask these questions like, who are you? What's your superpower? What is like what exactly is the product you wanted to put out there? How do you want it to connect with people? These questions can actually be very difficult. Again, it's you got to shed a lot. You got to let you go your ego to be completely honest with yourself. So sometimes it takes a few weeks to get through that process in a very honest way. But it needs to start with knowing who you are and what your company mission is and be so, so, so certain that is a mission. Like come out with like an actual sentence. So it's very, very defined. And that's actually really difficult because, I think it's a lot easier for us to come up with something that's super long, 2 pages, 3 pages of mission statements, value statements, whatever you want to call it. But it's so hard if you want it to actually condense that into one sentence, right? It takes a long process to do that. So that's what we usually help any kind of creators, innovators to really do that initially. So once they figured out who they are and be so honest with that and actually really believed in that, then we actually moved on with, okay, how do you connect with someone? And another thing that we would always do is to find a communication style that is actually comfortable for them.
Mm.
So I think that there's so many tips and tricks out there. Like, how do you sound authoritative, right? What sort of phrases you should be using, what not to say, what to say. There are a lot of information out there, but the thing is, if you're on stage and you have that fake it till you make it mentality, and you're basically copying, let's say, someone else's words and trying to sound like them or trying to sound authoritative. But eventually you're going to lose yourself again.
Mm.
And that's just not authentic. So even with communication, like the tone of voice, the words that you use, how do you ask question? Or sometimes, for a lot of introverts, we don't like to speak all that much. So how do you use that superpower? But introverts are very observant. So actually introverts can ask a lot of questions and let the extroverts to talk as much as they want. So finding that trick and also helping them to shape their own communication style, that's another thing that we tend to do with a lot of these creators and innovators.
That's so interesting. I kind of want to just out of curiosity myself, what
Mhm.
kind of drove you to specialize in that communication at that time anyway?
Mm. Um, I think it's kind of the results of my background and just because I'm originally from Taiwan. I'm actually in Taiwan now, but I study in the States and I studied and then also worked in finance and fashion industry. But eventually when I came back, I started to do education. I became a teacher. So I think it's just combining all these different things that I've done, but the common thread of it all is that I love talking to people. I just love interacting with people. I mean, obviously with finance, that's a little harder. So that's why I definitely stopped doing that for very quickly. I'm like, that's not for me. But I loved the retail side of things. That's really fun. I get to talk to so many different kind of people every day. I love doing that. And obviously, as a teacher, I get to talk to students, and most of my students are adults. They're all working professionals. And I think it's because of that. I just get so curious about how they wanted to speak, why, all these internal communication in their head before anything comes out. I get really curious about that. And that's really when I started to study and just try to source as much information as I can about communication because I feel like communication, it's not just about the words that you use. It's a lot about that internal communication with yourself, how much you know about yourself, and how do you project your voice, the tone of voice, everything. Everything, it's holistic. Yeah. So that's kind of how I got started with that.
That's so interesting because, yeah, it's something that is woven into everything that we do. As you say, communication is
Hmm.
not only the words you're saying, also what you're not saying.
Hmm.
It's the way you present yourself and the way that maybe if you're a brand, the way that you're putting your brand out there, the look and feel and vibe of what you're putting out as well.
Hmm.
It's so interesting, and there's definitely an art to it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when I was little, I always thought that I'm the least creative person ever because I don't know if it's education or just where I was. Producing art is not celebrated.
Mm.
It's just one of the subject in school, and I'm supposed to get a really good grade. I'm like, I don't even know how.
Before we continue, I want to pause and share something that I built for heart led creatives like you. Ember is the supportive space to ground, to regulate, to reset, and to grow. Inside, you'll learn how to work with your creative energy instead of against it, so you can move through blocks and deeply trust your voice. You can try Ember for free for 7 days. Just head to the link in the show notes to join us, and I cannot wait to see you inside. Now, let's get back to the episode.
So I thought the only way I can produce good art is to copy. That's all I did, just copy and sketch. That's it. Um, so I always thought that, well, I'm not creative. I'm not creative at all, but so to think that I wanted to do fashion, so I was like, okay, so maybe I do fashion marketing.
Mm.
That's more practical because I'm not creative. Um, but eventually, when I get into teaching and really wanted to dive into this communication, I feel like, oh, this is actually kind of fun. And I get to be creative. And this is how I actually use my creative muscle because I get to source all these information that I wanted to use and to run little experiments with my students to see what's the best method. And yeah, so to I kind of started with that. And I mean, when I was teaching, I basically produced every single like teaching material from scratch because I was just like, I'm not doing textbook. It's not fun. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly like your creativity in motion. I think a lot of people, probably not the ones
Mm,
listening, but a lot of people do get stuck in that space where we think, oh, I'm just not creative because I can't draw, or because I'm not the best at
mm,
drawing, or because I don't really like painting. But there's actually so much more to creativity than that. There's creativity flowing through anything. There's creativity in a science experiment. I
yeah.
think creativity is any moment driven by curiosity more
Mm,
than fear. So it's like, how can I, um, or fun or play, when you're
mm,
making
mm,
those teaching materials, it's like, yeah, textbook is boring. Yeah, PowerPoint presentation is so boring. How can we make
mm,
this actually engaging so people learn better? And how can we create something that is way more fun than you know,
mm.
another PowerPoint.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think I mentioned this on my platform once, but I think something happened when I first started my teaching career, and I think that definitely really pushes me to be more creative. And it wasn't a great experience, but now that I think about it, it was definitely the best lesson that I had. I was basically a new teacher, and I was actually following the book. I was following the book, exercise A and B and C. I was just kind of going through the motion, going through the order because I was told that's what you do. And I actually had a student, and she was way older than me at the time, but she was a retired teacher. And so she had the time to take extra classes in like a cram school. And so she raised her hand and she just went, Sherry, this is so boring. And right in that second, because I mean, again, like all my students were adults. They were there to learn English. And all of a sudden, I just felt like this urge to cry because I was
Mm.
so embarrassed. Like it was such an embarrassing moment. I still cannot forget about it. But I held, I was like, okay, just keep it composed, Sherry. Just get through the class. I got through the class, and on my way home, I just cried the entire way because I was never
Mm.
felt so embarrassed, and I felt like such a failure at the time. But from that point on, I decided to create my own material. Just like I just threw my textbook away. I'm just like, I'm not going to follow that anymore. I'm going to create my own. I'm going to use YouTube videos. I'm going to use TED Talk. I mean, TED Talk was like a big thing at the time.
Yeah.
I'm going to use articles. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use movies and TV shows. So I started to become really creative because of that lady. So I just felt like sometimes, these moments comes in and you have no idea just how much that could actually push you. Yeah.
Yeah, God, I want to cry for you. Well, I can totally imagine that. And I've had similar things like when teaching yoga classes or stuff when I was like beginning my teaching journey. And when people get up and walk out the class, it's like, oh my God.
Oh my
And you never
goodness.
know. They might be doing that because they live in London and they discovered they need to leave early because they have a meeting. They just
Hmm.
didn't tell me, but you never know. Or because, they
Yeah.
have an injury and it's not feeling that good, so they just leave. But then you do make it about like,
Yeah.
well, it's about me and who I am and not my value as a teacher or as whatever. But then there is
Hmm.
kind of a magic to it that moment
Hmm.
then drives you to discover another layer to yourself that maybe you hadn't met yet, and
Hmm.
also to make your own job more fun as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely cherish that experience so much because I think that really pushes me and just made me who I am today. But basically from that point on, I'm just like, all right, I'm just gonna keep pushing. I'm just gonna keep like pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. I think I have this little radar in my head. Like if I do something consistently, continuously for a period of time, I have a little radar in my head. It's just like, okay, let's do something different. Let's do something riskier. See how much you can push yourself.
Yeah, love that because I think it's really easy to get stuck in that space of comfort, and then it does take awareness that you're there for sure. And if you're
Mhm.
not that self-aware yet, then you might just get bored or start to question what you're doing. And I think that if you haven't got that little bit of fear, then um yeah, you're not kind of reaching your potential, I think.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I try to do that for a lot of my clients as well.
Mm.
Especially when it comes to communication, because again, when they first learn about, let's say, they understand the company, they understand the product, and then we go into, okay, what's your communication style? How do you sound, stay authentic, but also push yourself a little bit more? And how do you, learn a little bit about small talk or networking? I mean, I think for a lot of creators and innovators, that's the worst part of
Yeah, everybody hates
selling.
that. I hate going to networking events. You're just standing there like, please, someone come and talk to me.
Yeah. Exactly, exactly. Is the worst part. And also talking about prices. That's another
Mm.
the hardest part because you literally feel like, am I putting a dollar amount on myself?
Yeah.
Because it's the same. It feels the same. And when someone is asking for discount, you're like, what are you talking about? Yeah. So I think we're really helping my clients to just to push through because it's layers and layers. It's just challenges after challenges. Every time you present, there's some tough questions coming at you. How do you answer that kind of questions? Or if people are being really rude, sometimes I mean investors and people, they're people. They can be really rude. Do you need to actually answer that question? Maybe not. Maybe you need to help, just stay true to who you are and you move on because not every investors are good investors. Not all money is good money. So I think it's just a lot of these back and forth. It's like know who you are, test your boundary a little bit and come back and to really stay true to yourself and have that balance and but continuously to push your boundary a little bit and to get out of your comfort zone a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. I think that saying your price for whatever you charge or whatever out loud sometimes can be a real like stuck in the throat moment for so many people. Is there anything that you can give as like a small practice or tip for people to
Mhm,
get more comfortable with that?
mhm. I think the hardest thing, I will specifically talk about service provider, like coaches, teacher. I think it is the hardest thing because it's so hard to put a price on your service, right? Because it's literally your time, your effort is you. It's who you are. You're presenting. You are the product, essentially. And I've worked with a lot of coaches as well, and it is the hardest thing to just say the price. But what I find is that everyone already have this internal number. They have
Mm,
this number. Everyone does. And so what I try to do is to really encourage them just to say, I think the simple thing is just write it down. Write down the number. Don't think too much. Just write down whatever you think is reasonable because I think reasonable is very subjective. And depending on where you're at, like very, maybe in the very beginning of the career, it's okay to start a little low, right? You're okay with
yeah.
that. It's reasonable. You're learning. You wanted to develop your craft and you're okay to charge a little bit less. That's reasonable for you. But if you're, you know, 2, 3 years in, obviously you want to increase your price. But start with what's reasonable. And I try to just help them to really how do I say, to come up with that certainty inside of you to just stay true.
Mm,
Because a lot of times people start to ask for discounts or what about this? What about that? And what if I buy more sessions? Can I get a discount? Agents do this. Just not trying to generalize, but it's part of the process, to be honest. Like here in Asia, when we're selling our services, you know that they're going to ask us for discount no matter what. It is a process.
mm,
So you always want to go a little higher. You wanted to add that buffer in just in case, right? So that
mm,
when you are giving that discount, because it's sometimes it is a process, and for a lot of my corporate clients, that is a process of HR. That's what they do. They have to ask for discounts, or their accountants will have to ask for
mm,
discount. So you leave a little buffer. So what's reasonable? And then you leave a little buffer and you just tell them that, all right, because we know each other, because whatever the reason you wanted to give, here is the 5% discount. But you still walk away feeling very comfortable and your clients walk away feeling like they have done their job. So they can now report to their boss that they have asked for the discount.
yeah.
Um, and I know this sounds kind of funny, but I think that's my 10 year of experience taught me is that you always just have to add a little bit more just in case. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to kind of go low and then people try and make it go lower. But I think it's, as
Hmm.
you say, it's the conviction of what you're willing to put up with or what you're willing to take, and however much you can put your energy behind at that moment.
Yeah.
Like whatever feels like a good amount, like a bit of a stretch, yeah. But like if charging
Hmm.
10K for something feels like whoa, like way out there, and it brings up way too many fears and
Yeah. Yeah.
self-worth issues and everything going in, then you can't put your energy behind it and you can't like have that
Yeah.
confident like backbone um
Yeah.
behind that. I love to segue a little bit into what you're doing now with your work with soft power, and I mentioned this to you before recording when we spoke last time.
Mhm.
It's so funny that you have that called soft power, because I actually have a course called Soft Power: 7 Steps to Uncover Your Authentic Creative
Yeah.
Voice. And it's all about uncovering your creative voice, which is kind of funny. But I'd love to know, for you
Mhm.
now, going into your work with soft power and your podcast as well, but what is that
Mhm.
really about for you?
Mhm. Yes, so thank you for asking me that. It's been a year now that I created Soft Power, and I would say when I started the project, so I named it Soft Power Project, it's literally a project because at the time I was in a very low point. I left a client that I absolutely loved, but it became really toxic for me, so I had to leave. There was a lot of shedding. There was a lot of shedding. Obviously, 2025. In the very beginning of the year, I'm
Yeah.
like, I started to just like, oh God, like just ego death left and right. Um, but I started that project thinking that, on this journey. I'm coming back to myself. I don't know what's going to happen. It's so uncertain. I'm so scared all the time, like all the time, every single day, because I don't know what's going to come. And I was in the process of getting getting more clients because I had to really basically fire the client. So I had to get my consulting business back on track. And it was really difficult. But so I started that project and I just need to know what other women are doing and how and their wisdom of going through that process. And the more people that I interviewed, the more I realized that, wow, it's kind of cool that women everywhere, regardless of skin tone, color, just culture, background, and language they speak, we're all going through the same thing. We're coming back to ourselves. And there's so much the messiness, the in between, the ego death that I think we don't normally want it to show because again, it's messy. Like people don't want to be that vulnerable. But I think a lot of us had starting to put that out there. And I definitely try to do that because I want people to feel less alone. And I want people to feel, to just simply take that shame away from that process because starting over, there's nothing to be ashamed about. I had to start over again and again and again and again. Um, there were times that definitely I felt so guilty that I felt like I'm 43. What am I doing in my life? Why am I starting over again? But I wanted to take that shame away. And I was hoping that if I'm able to just put myself out there, maybe it's going to be fun, where maybe it's not going to be this um, challenging or this scary. Maybe I can do this with other women. So I think that's how I got started. And a year in, I'm really like, I think it's kind of crazy to think about just how many women I get to connect and hear their stories. And obviously, I'm going to talk to you next week. So I'm really excited about that. I think and then really know that women, I think recently I've seen a lot of just women just coming together and really supporting each other because I think that is, that's the most important thing is for us to support each other. That needs to start and that needs to come from us being so certain with our own power. And I think at this point, the way I define soft power is that just having that certainty of our power where we don't need to chase. We don't need to persuade. We don't have to convince anyone of our power, just owning that. So, yeah, that's kind of how it got started and where it's heading at this point.
Yeah, I love that. I think that definitely that's something that um, a lot of us think that when we're speaking about confidence or conviction in yourself, it comes with like this hard edge of like, well, then you've got to be
Mm,
like
hmm.
forceful and strong and, in your face a bit. But I
Yeah.
think actually what is stronger than that is cultivating that like quiet inner anchored
Hmm.
conviction or strength within yourself that doesn't have to be argumentative or doesn't have to be chasing, doesn't have to be hustling, really. It's, as you say, you kind of become more magnetic to the thing that you, whatever you desire, when you cultivate that feeling of like quiet empowerment within you, or authentic as well. I mean, some people, if you are louder, then like go for it, but it's still that kind
Mhm.
of, that feeling of conviction within yourself is like exactly that. It's just sort of like an energy that resides within you,
Mhm.
I think.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've I felt like it has this whole entire year has really changed the way I look at myself. And honestly, I felt like I have changed so much. And I truly value um just all these women being able to just put themselves out there and show their vulnerability. And that to me is just it's so amazing because they're able to remove that shame away for me so that when I move on, when I am still, I feel like I'm consistently transforming or
Mm.
reinventing. I don't think that'll ever stop. I mean, when I first started the project, I felt like this is just going to be like a short period of time, right? I'm going to reinvent and I'm done. But now a year in, it's like, no, I don't think it'll ever be done. And it's okay. It's actually kind of fun and just yeah. So I'm definitely really enjoying that and also putting myself out there using whatever that I used to teach my clients, like how do you communicate? How do you do social media? How do you connect with your audience? Who are your audience? Putting that to test, like actually going through all of those things myself on myself, be completely honest with myself, and then kind of experiment and test things out. You know, this works, this doesn't work, and how do I make that better? And how to be patient with myself. How do I not chase the number, even though the number's right there? I mean, social media, they literally put the
Yeah.
numbers right
Mm.
there. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's been a process.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's it's easy and it feels comfortable, more comfortable, I think, at the time when you go through that like ego death, or when you go through a period of like not really knowing what the hell you're doing with life, to be like, oh well, as soon as I got it figured out, everything's gonna be fine. Or as soon as like then I'm healed, then I am
Hmm.
good, then I'll like be
Yeah.
fine. And it's like I think actually it's just being fine with the process of continuously kind of
Mhm.
unraveling yourself, or kind of meeting new versions of yourself. As you say, it does makes it way more fun, because like again, we keep kind of meeting ourselves, like we meet ourselves for the first time again, you're like, oh, I didn't handle that in the same way I used to, wow. Or like, wow,
Mm.
where's this confidence to put myself out in whatever way come from? It's just
Hmm.
like we've manifested it from somewhere, or we've created it within ourselves somehow. And I say, I think that's way more interesting. And I think for creatives, sometimes we can get stuck in a bit of a box, even though we hate putting ourselves in boxes, but we can subconsciously do it sometimes because we give ourselves like a style of what we create. This is my style of art, this is my style of design,
Yeah.
this is my whatever. And you want to become known for that one thing, but then if you actually start, if it starts to not feel like it's you expressed outwardly anymore, it can then feel really uncomfortable. It's like growing pains or something, of like, well
Mm.
then who is this person now that's trying to make stuff? And it's continuously then meeting that new version of yourself and being open to the change can be
Mm.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is extremely uncomfortable. I feel like I'm still feeling that discomfort every day. I mean, every time I post something online, it's still like, ugh, cringe. What do I
Yeah.
do? And just hit, just like, just press that button,
Yeah, you
right?
just gotta hold your breath and send it. Like I've definitely have that, and I have phases where I feel like a little bit cocooned around that, of like, oh, I don't really want to share stuff, or I don't really know
Yeah.
what's going on to put it out. But then you just, there's a phases where you have to honor if you just need a break, but then there's also moments where you have to lovingly kick yourself up the bum and just like just put it out, like just let it go, and then close your phone for a few hours and forget about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, I think this process really allows me to have a little bit more compassion for, I mean, for myself. I think that's first and foremost, and just teaching myself to be really kind to myself because you know what? No one else is going to come into my place and be like, Sherry, you're doing a good job. No one else is going to say that. So I'm just going to have to tell myself that. Um, and I think that also, I'm also be able to apply that to my training classes. Like if I'm out there teaching in the corporate environment, doing my training, I actually found that I have changed the way I communicate with the students and changed the way I teach because I had this respect for just listening. It's not just the talking, it's me listening and
Mm.
observing. And to teach people, emotion plays a really large part in our communication. And I think, like you said, a lot of times we feel like when we're presenting, it's the front, like we're wearing a mask or wearing this armor. We gotta be like so, confident and just do our best and actually present our best side. But I I, I started to tell my students, it's everyone has a really down day. Whatever that you are suffering in life, you carry that to your job. And emotion definitely will affect the way you listen, the way as an audience or as a presenter. So that definitely, that is something we have to think about when it comes to communication because there is no right or wrong. It really depends on situation. And yeah, I just feel like I've changed a lot because of this project, even as a communication trainer. Yeah.
Mm. Wow, I love that. That's awesome. I finished the conversation with everyone with the same two questions. So
Mm,
I'm eager to know what you're going to say. The first one
okay.
is, what do you think is the most common misconception people have, either about you or about the work you do, whichever you want to go with?
Um, I think that's a really good question. Um, I'll say this, because I have such diverse working experience, I'm a trainer, I'm running software project, I'm a podcaster, I'm a consultant. It's hard for me to even explain, like in one
Mm.
go, like what do I actually do? But the thing is, I do love doing all these different things, and I feel like they really fulfill me, right, in different aspect of my life. But when I do try to explain that, especially with a lot of people, um, I think it's just people who are used to the corporate job, used to having one job at a time. People laughed often ask me that, oh, are you doing this to find yourself or actually to find what you actually wanted to do? So I had someone to literally said that to me, but I kind of laughed and I just told him that, no, I actually really enjoy doing all of that. That's who I am. But I laughed because I think people are still, I think especially people my age, and you're way younger, people my age, in my generation, I think we're so used to doing one job, right? You graduate, you get a job, and you do as long as you want, and then you get promoted, and that's the track. I think I think people just think that that's what we do. And if you are trying different things, that just means that you haven't really found yourself yet. And that is one thing that I think a lot of people misunderstand me. Yeah, that's like
Yeah,
misunderstanding I get.
I think a lot of the listeners will resonate with that because I think a lot of us are kind of multi hyphenate people of like
Yeah.
doing like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And it is like I'm definitely the same. And some people don't really get it. Or even like sometimes family members are like, I'm not really sure what you do, but I'm like really proud of
Yeah, exactly.
whatever it may be. I'm sure I think it's going well and I'm really proud of you, but I'm not totally sure exactly what it is.
No, exactly. My dad still has to this day no idea what I do because I try to explain podcasting to him. He's like, "What is that?" I'm like, "Radio. I do radio." That's all I tell-
Basically radio.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
that. The second question that I like to ask everyone is if you look back, it could be over your whole life or it could be over your career, to a conversation that's really stuck with you. Who were you
Mm.
speaking to and what did they say that has like been with you? until now?
Mm. I think it has to be my dad. Um, and I remember at the time I was going through a really difficult time. It was in finance, and I was basically, I think it was like 5 months before I decided to leave that job, and it was financial crisis. I don't know if you remember or your
Wow.
listeners actually remember. It was like 2009. I was working in investment bank. I was working in the basically the industry that got hit really, really hard. And I was having such a hard time to find someone to help me with that particular project. I would be calling different offices multiple times a day for weeks and weeks and weeks, and no one was willing to help me. And I got so frustrated because, at the time, I think I really defined myself as someone who is very productive or get things done. I have this like masculine energy about me who I just kind of do. That's really that's who I am. That's my identity. So when I cannot check something off the list for months, I was so frustrated. And I asked my dad, what am I going to do? And he just told me that, you know, give it time. Time always fix everything. And and I took that. And obviously it's not like an quote unquote actual solution to the problem. But honestly, I wasn't like, I didn't really know what I was looking for. But when he told me that, I said, okay, I'm going to take my time and time will always fix it. And what's funny is that the next week, I actually found someone. I found someone who was willing to help me. Everything got resolved on that day very, very quickly. But I just feel like, patience, it's something, I mean, people say patience is virtue, right? But until you're willing to put yourself out there and really let the time to give you that solution, you never really quite understand what that actually means. And I'm still practicing my patience. I mean, I think it's still one of the most difficult thing in the world. But it just when I face with uncertainty, that's that's something that I think about. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. And think that it, even just without realizing, switching your mindset into, okay, time, something is going to come. We go from trying to control into a little bit more of a surrendered space, and not like, when I say surrender, I don't mean apathy, like the world's going to happen to
Hmm.
me or something's going to just
Hmm.
magically come if I just sit on the couch. But you just kind of go into a space of like, oh, okay, I'm just going to be positive about this, do what I can, and know, trust something's going to happen, however long it takes.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I really try to understand what that means, surrendering. I think that was another really difficult word and concept for me to understand. I'm 43. I mean, I'm still trying to figure that out. Like, what does it actually feel like? What does it mean to surrender? How do I surrender not as like an aftermath, but more like something that I do daily? I think that's still something that I'm kind of discovering. But I think, like you said, it is surrendering because a lot of times there's nothing you can do about it. You're just gonna have to wait and then do as much as you can, try your best and wait for the universe to give you the best solution. It's probably even better than what you imagined. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You could get something better than you're trying to kind of control or hustle your way um,
Yeah.
towards. And I think that it's like, as I said, it's not an apathetic thing. It's definitely keep showing up, keep doing what you can, keep
Mhm.
holding the vision that feels true to you, be open to something else coming in or something better coming in. It's like keep trying your best, but surrender the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm still trying to understand what that means in real
It's a
life in every single day.
lifelong practice, I think. Definitely. It's something that
Yeah.
definitely. Well, Sherry, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure to have you. I'm so excited to be on your show soon. Um,
Yeah.
for everyone listening, where is the best place that they can find you and your podcast and your work?
Yeah, so I'm on Spotify, Apple. I'm also on YouTube as well. Just type Soft Power Project, and I'm on Instagram. That's really where I do most of my marketing because, I can only focus on one thing at a time. And it's
Mm-hmm.
soft underscore power underscore project. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I'll leave the links, of course, in the show notes, everybody. But thanks again for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. As always, do let us know what you've taken away from this episode. You can share the episode with a friend or just share it on social media. And if you do, then be sure to tag us both. Otherwise, and thank you so much for listening again, everybody. And I'll see you again next week. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Maverick Mind. I hope that you've loved it, and if you have, I would appreciate it so much if you would subscribe and write a 5-star review on wherever you're listening to this podcast from. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, I invite you to join me over on Instagram at maverickmindco or on my website maverickmind.elliefoden.com. And I'll see you in another podcast very, very soon.